Thank you. Happy.
A dynamic duo of dystopia universe dreamers here. She's the one and only Lily Fox-Lim, who's lovely, and I'm the ambassador of the fans, Star Trek fans.
And he's known as Brian Kreutz, not just the ambassador to Trek fans. We both welcome the Star Trek universe of fandom, that's you, back to our show, A Captain's Log.
Yes, indeedy. In this second part of our captivating interview with Ricardo F. Delgado, we delve deeper into the fascinating world of art illustrations in the early stages of production design, and more on our interstellar exploration of Deep Space Nine in Hollywood.
Well, if wishes were horses, then a man alone named Ricardo F. Delgado would be pulled into a vortex of the enduring Star Trek legacy to visually progress the storyteller's ideas artistically in the promenade, or looking out a spaceport, or perhaps designing a stand for extremely sweet Bajor and gymnastics as the illustrator on Deep Space Nine.
Oh my God, what do we do to deserve you? Are you freaking kidding me? Wow! You just described Delgado in 5 Star Trek Deep Space Nine titles? That has to be a Guinness Book of World Record. Oh my God!
Well,
masterfully done.
Thank you. I aim to please with my Trek expertise. So I believe you have the first question. Calm down. I believe you have the first question to ask, Ricardo.
Oh my God! Trekkies love Lily. Okay, so Ricardo, you illustrated so many portions of the interior, starting with Emissary, the pilot of what shaped Deep Space Nine to become this iconic series at the Paramount Production Designers and kind of early concept stages, faithfully created by you in your conceptualization. Now, this is a fascinating start into the new frontier for Star Trek, thanks to you and Herman Zimmerman. Can you talk about that approach that was new territory for Star Trek with a Cardassian space station?
After Emissary was done, right, that was kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. Then we started production on the episodes, right? And so then from there, we spent a lot of time on Stage 18. If I didn't say this before, I'll say this now. The stages for Deep Space Nine were Stage 4, Stage 17, and Stage 18. Stage 4 was primarily the Deep Space Nine interiors. Stage 17 was exclusively the promenade, which is a set that I had a big hand in designing. And Stage 18 was kind of like, that was like the episode stage. Like that's where they build, you know, the planetary stuff. The runabout interior, runabout exterior was on Stage 18, and right across the way, on Stage 8, 9, and 10, and maybe on 6 were the next gen sets. And just in front of the Stage 9 and 8, everybody who's looking on the Paramount lot map that you've Googled, that's where the trailers were for the actors. And the trailers for the actors for Deep Space Nine ran east to west, just below Stage 4. When I came in, mm-hmm. Herman had a pretty strong idea what he wanted in terms of the Cardassian architecture. Yeah. And it's based on this Japanese architect named Shin Takamatsu. And so I don't know if that's a revelation or if it's something that's been discussed already, but Herman had this gorgeous, just immense book of Takamatsu photographs. You can Google them, it'll come up, and it's going to start looking like Deep Space Nine pretty quickly. I have to say, his stuff is was really impressive. Takamatsu stuff just kind of really felt at home, with contrasting sort of the straight edge, complex, you know, Cardassians with the very serene and, you know, more genteel, you know, Bajorans. And, you know, the whole idea was to sort of have this sort of revolution, you know, this conflict going on. And I think that Herman had really good instincts. It paid off, because if you watch that show and if you look at Mr. Takamatsu's stuff, you definitely see, you know, the inspiration there. And, you know, one of the wonderful things about the show is the stuff that you can get away with. Like a lot of the wall paneling that you see in Star Trek, you know, on the sets is actually carpeting, you know.
Really?
But, yeah, wow. but to the naked eye, to the screen, that far away. Like Michael Kuda is big on saying, Ricardo, they're never going to see that. They're just like, they're never going to see that. And so he was really fond of putting like 2001 A Space Odyssey gags into some of the graphics, you know, some of the really small lettering, because he's like, no one's going to see that, dude. No one's going to see it. And I would be like, okay, you know, so we'll see if DS9 ever goes, you know, HD, how that works out. The other avenue that we went with in terms of like Bajor, that I think we discussed before coming on, a lot of that was based on Angkor Wat and sort of Cambodian, you know, ancient architecture. It just felt right. It felt reverential, you know, seemed like it was some of the architecture for, you know, Bajor just needed to feel very sacred, if you will, you know, a place where you could reflect. And the Cardassians were just like not into that.
Really? You think? Oh, wait, Star Trek Deep Space Nine had a co-creator, Michael Piller, who loved baseball like you, in particular Los Angeles sports and the Dodgers. Go Blue. Tell us how your idea to add the baseball and baseball card to Commander Sisko's desk in his office next to Ops came about.
The Buck Bokai baseball card that's on Cisco's desk, that like Mike and I worked on that like big time, because I was more of a baseball fan. So is Rick Berman, by the way.
Oh, is he really? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the few times I interacted with Rick was for we talked baseball, you know. And so because he was a baseball fan, a lot of that stuff got worked into the storyline sometimes, right? So the Buck Bokai card came in, and so the front of the card is the actor. The back of the card is the great model, the immortal, the great, the very dearly missed Greg Jean. A lot of people don't know that, but Greg Jean, I mean, I had no business being in the same room with Greg Jean, because Greg Jean had built all those amazing forced perspective miniatures for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know, just incredible. I think his credit on the Cameron Avatar is master model maker, and deservedly so. And just, you know, but he was just Greg that would come in on every other Friday with some small ship that he had built, and we would ooh and ah over it before he would take it into. I think he had to take it either to visual effects or to Berman's office to give it the final, you know, thumbs up. But it was what a treat to have Greg come in, and I was really lucky and fortunate to be able to see him one last time a couple years ago before he passed.
Oh yes, everyone loves Buck Bokai, the fictional London Kings hitter who broke Joe DiMaggio's streak. 1 hit per game for over 57 times? You know, this was originally brought up in the Next Generation holodeck episode, The Big Goodbye, in Season 1, yet your prop idea for the baseball and baseball card put in Sisko's office brought this into fruition in the Deep Space Nine episode, If Wishes Were Horses, which you mentioned.
I did.
Tell us more about this idea where you were actually heard and listened to and thought out this process to put it on Sisko's desk. Tell us how it turned out on screen from your perspective.
And so all the graphics that went in on the back were generated by Mike, but, you know, I would tell him, well, usually you'd have to go from single A to double A to triple A, and then you get to the major leagues, right? You know, and so we made up, like, the single A was Gotham City, the double A was Tanis from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh my God!
I forget what the triple A was, man. But the card is on. It's got to be in the making of Deep Space Nine. We had to design the front and the back, you know, and that was one of those instances where Mike is like, we're going to put Greg in the back. Okay, Greg's picture is going to be in the back, and I believe. I forget whether Greg came in to shoot it, right? Because it's got to be the same pose, right? Correct?
Yeah, right.
It's got to be the same pose. Okay, so I forget whether they shot Greg first and then they matched the actor, but that stuff had to sort of go through Herman, right? Like Mike had to like it, and then Herman had to, you know, approve it, and then it went to Berman, and once they were both approved, then you can have the card created. And again, because on baseball cards the picture is sideways, when you lean it like this, right?
Yeah,
The
right.
picture is going to be sideways, this way, oriented on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Kuda's like, Ricardo, they're never going to see it. No one's ever going to notice that, you know? And so again, if we ever get an HD, DS9 season 1, we'll see how that plays out.
Brian, I think you have that VHS tape of the Terry Farrell hosted The Making of Deep Space Nine.
Yes, I do. You must have got this out of my collection. Awesome. Yes. This is to behold, absolutely. So, Ricardo, Deep Space Nine in its first season in 1993 had a lot of creative people like yourself. Please tell us about the starships you designed, including that Miradorn starship that was seen in the Deep Space Nine first season episode titled Vortex, another one that you referenced. Mm-hmm. And tell us about the intricate details that go into your illustrations for final camera-ready designs.
In my opinion, the final design does not look like what I drew, but that's just...
Oh, really?
Yeah, it feels a little different, but some of that stuff again is what can you build in the time available, right? And I didn't think about that stuff back then. I was like, hey, let's do a cool shape. And also one of the basic principles of set design is anytime you get into curves, that's more money. Like a doorway, a traditional doorway, no problem.
Yeah.
But if you want a circular doorway, that's going to cost you some money. And so that, the Miradorn ship, that is just kind of another lesson on my end in terms of like what can be built in the time allotted to build it. Every time I see like, a communications badge or, the pins on the collar, mm-hmm. or, like we were talking about the door that the circular door that opens, it doesn't really bring up the memory of drawing it as much as it brings up the memory of the friendships and the very kind people that I had the fortune to work with and meet.
Ricardo, we're going to show viewers an early concept art piece that you sketched for the Borg Queen in the 1996 film Star Trek First Contact. Tell us about this newfound and enduring idea still used for Borg Queens today. Your ideas and how was this integrated into the script?
I was working at Disney on the film. I was working at Disney Feature Animation on this movie called Dinosaur, Disney's Dinosaur.
Oh, yeah.
And I got a call from Herman saying, Ricardo, can you do some work on the show? And so all the stuff I did for First Contact was done at home at night and on the weekends. First Contact, I was called in specifically to do the Borg. Mm-hmm. And I dove right in. And a lot of people don't know this, that the Borg suits for the TV shows were built on top of the molds for the Michael Keaton Batman suits.
I didn't know that about the Borg
That's
suits.
Crazy.
Wow, Michael Keaton's Batman suit is the mold? That is revealing information, Ricardo.
One of the cool things about back then, and I have to say this as an aside, mm-hmm. that a lot of the makeup effect shops would share stuff.
A captain's log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log.
Much of the now classic 1996 Star Trek First Contact concept art is horrifying, yet it came to fruition on film. However, Lili and I are fascinated and are in the middle of an interview with the aforementioned First Contact film illustrator, Ricardo Delgado. Now, he's sharing his stories behind the Borg concept art. Now, as the late, great Vin Scully would say in Dodger broadcasts, let's get back to this one.
So with Star Trek Deep Space Nine being the first big break of your career and your influence over that iconic 1990s show, how did your experience on the series translate over to working on the film when you signed on in 1996 with First Contact? And who, if any, did you work with again? Tell us the differences, even though it's from the same franchise.
What the writers and director Frakes and Rick Berman and everybody involved did really well is they told a very human story in a science fiction setting, and that's really the edict that Star Trek, has always sort of professed and mm-hmm. more often than not delivered with, is the idea that you tell a very human story about these very alien, encounters. And, the ending of First Contact is really, really cool. Mm-hmm. I think it's very impressive and, a very satisfying story. They all can't be like that. And honestly, some of them have lived up to it and surpassed it, and some of them haven't. But, I'm proud of that one.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
It's a good story in the end. In my opinion, the magic to Trek is a lot of the bad guys have like really good stories behind them, really good backstories, and so you kind of get why they're in conflict with the Federation or or the people that they're in conflict with. But the Borg, they're just kind of like, hey, you know what? You got to join the club. You'll be the club, and we're not going to vote on it. This isn't a democracy. We're just going to absorb you. Okay, okay. And that's what I mean. That's what I try to think about in terms of what that was like, and to sort of explain sort of like the evil empire version of the Trek universe. They don't see themselves as the evil empire, right? I get
Right.
that,
Hmm.
but that's not the way, that's not the way it feels, most certainly to everybody else. And and that's why I went with the whole insect analogy, right? Whether it
Hmm.
be bees or wasps, or more specifically ants, like the idea that there's this very, singular society, one-minded hive mentality,
Hmm.
right? That just moved in one direction based on the direction of one person, ironically, right? One being. She's the
Queen.
decision maker. She was the numbers cruncher and the species cruncher at the same time, And I think that that's also what drew it to me. And again, to be candid, I think I looked at that kind of like, hey, that's cool. Sure, I'll do it. No problem. But now I look at it like, man, that was a real honor to be asked to do that.
Hmm.
Like there was a billion other artists that they could have asked to have taken a dive into the Borg universe, and I was really fortunate to be, the lucky kid at the right moment. So pretty happy to have been part of that. Certainly, I remember a screening that I went to with my brother-in-law, I believe, and went to the Paramount lot, and I think that was one of the first big screenings of a movie that I had seen on a lot, right? And so it was cool to see everybody there that worked on the show. I was kind of like the hired gun,
Hmm.
and it was for me a privilege to do it.
You did a Borg Obelisk concept art design with a Borg sphere, and you presented it to Herman Zimmerman and Rick Berman and the director, Jonathan Frakes. Can you tell us about that, Ricardo?
I did a version of the Borg cube, but I did an obelisk, an Egyptian obelisk.
Really?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it's somewhere, I think if you do my last name in Borg obelisk, it'll pop up.
Okay.
But I do remember showing that to Herman, and the idea was that there's this obelisk of all those little intricate, uh, lines and textures that are reminiscent of the Borg. But when it splits up, you would see a Borg sphere inside. And Herman looked at that and said, Ricardo, that's a nice drawing, but the format is horizontal, not vertical. Usually when you're a concept artist, you put the drawings out and everyone's looking at them, and then they just look at you like, okay, explain yourself, soldier, and that's where you gotta sort of do the soft shoe and explain your concepts.
Ricardo, after Star Trek, your career really took off into greater visibility on the Hollywood film scale. As a professional concept artist plus illustrator, please talk about your work on major motion pictures like Patrick Stewart's younger cameo film X-Men Origins Wolverine, Men in Black, Species, and How to Train Your Dragon. Or just tell us how your career opened up so widely, and maybe a quick tidbit from each of the films that you fondly remember.
After the first season, I desperately still wanted to fulfill my dream of working in film.
Mm.
And as much as I loved working on DS9, I had these heroes that I grew up reading about on Cinefex, the Spielbergs, the Lucases, the Jim Camerons, and I wanted to work with those guys. And I I ended up in the art department of True Lies, and I kind of fulfilled all that. I work with Cameron on in the art department for True Lies. I learned a lot on that show as well. Cameron truly is, visionary and a genius. And even back then, he knew all the department heads' jobs better than his department heads, and just a truly impressive storyteller, filmmaker, auteur, or whatever you want to call him. Wanted to work with Spielberg. I spent a lot of time on a few different Amblin projects, most notably Men in Black and Jurassic Park 3, you know, being around Spielberg and his whole retinue of teams that would, you know, create the Amblin films, that even though he didn't direct Men in Black or Jurassic Park 3, you know, there was definitely, well, we got to show Steven this. We got to run it by Steven. And I understood and respected that. And, you know, I enjoyed working in animation as well. And I think I kind of came off into people or the factories that were DreamWorks Animation and Disney Animation. I was kind of like the live action guy that could be brought in and draw designs that were kind of suited for live action but could be animated, you know. And I think that that's the way it worked out. How to Train Your Dragon was kind of a lucky break for me. I'd not worked with Dean DeBlois or Chris Sanders on Atlantis, but I knew who they were. You know, they knew who I was, and so I was brought on specifically to design that sort of big mean dragon at the end. And I think about 75% of what I did is on that character. You know, Species was my first storyboarding job. I got into storyboarding as well, you know, and Roger Donaldson, for whatever reason, thought that I was capable of storyboarding. I'd shown him some effects boards that I had done for Apollo 13 and for Sequest DSV, and so they knew that I could effects board, but he didn't know whether I could board people. And I showed him some more boards. Like I storyboarded the main title sequence for DS9. A lot of people don't know that, and so I showed those storyboards as well. And so I kind of went back and forth in the 90s between storyboards and concept art, and you know, it was just a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed going back and forth between, you know, film and animation, you know, or live action and animation. I just looked at it as, you know, they're just telling stories, and I enjoyed being part of all that. I look at my time working in film and animation as a training ground, and I work with some of the best storytellers in the world. And you know, whether it was at Disney with that lineage of animation, or whether it was working with Jim Cameron or George Lucas or Ron Howard or John Landis, all they would talk about is the story, right? That's all that they focused on. How could the assets that we're creating fit into our story? And I'm proud of the stuff I've done. You know, there's shows that I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of everything we talked about today. I'm proud of The Incredibles. I'm, you know, proud of Atlantis and some of the other shows that I've worked on. So Men in Black is probably if not my favorite thing that I've worked on. It's one of them. It's very, you know, there's a lot of things that came together on that show that made it, I think, something special. So, you know, I've had a lot of luck. I've been really fortunate. And now, you know, I like telling my own stories, and I like people reading my stories, and I hope that'll continue to happen.
A captain's log returns in a moment.
Ricardo, please tell us how life is going for you today. You're a family man and you are still working in Hollywood, I presume, but please share a website and maybe a social media handle where viewers can find out more about you and your work, please.
Find me on Facebook and Instagram. I do more of my own stuff these days. I'm actually what I consider to be in the second renaissance of my career, if I can even be allowed to use that word. But I write and illustrate my own books now. I've gotten to a point where I have a few books that I've written, and they'll be published through Clover Press. Clover Press is a really cool place for, I'm not a young man, but I'm young at heart, I guess. And so I've been really lucky to have connected with Clover and to start publishing my concept art book. It's an art of book based on my Dracula of Transylvania novel. So I actually have an art of my stuff, just like all my heroes that I grew up worshiping as a kid. I have about another dozen books that I want to create using that format. It's a novel. And it's an illustrated novel, but it's illustrated with concept art.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you know, really, really proud of that. And I have another book coming out later this year that I can't talk about. And I'm very honored to be in that position now. I teach, ironically, at Art Center College of Design, the college that I graduated from. And so it's a very circular thing for me these days. I still do studio work. There's some stuff that I've done that I actually can't talk about. You know how that goes. It's all
I do.
super.
NDA.
I mean, it's a little, yeah, I mean, it's a little silly for me. Like, hey, why not say that I worked on this? But, I'm not showing everybody the designs that are like right there, and I can't show them to you. But I still do that stuff. But I do enjoy, the work that I do on film projects, and I do enjoy the stuff that I do, creating my own books, my own illustrated books. The idea behind my books, the pitch is concept art books. So I write the novel, and then I illustrate it with concept art. And so that's kind of my new spiel now. Please track me down on social media. Like I said, Facebook and Instagram. I used to be on Twitter, but not anymore. I'm on Threads as well. So, hunt me down. I'm always around posting stuff that I think is fun.
Ricardo, it's been one heck of a ride in stride for you and a magical look back on your career. Thank you for sharing a half hour with BK and I here on A Captain's Log.
My pleasure. It's been fun sort of reminiscing about all that stuff. All the hijinks and all the friendships are everything, man. And I appreciate all that, more than, my drawings and my art. Like I said before, I see, designs that I did or moments from the show, and I don't think of my drawings. I think of the friendships, the goofing around, the oh my God, we got to do it right now because there's a deadline, all that fun stuff. And then when you see it on the screen, you go, yeah, we did that. That's cool.
Yes, this has been a very insightful and retrospect look back to the 1990s.
Respect for the retrospect.
Absolutely. Tracking some more news and interviews with Lili's Insight next week. As those take flight, we're warping out of here.
Bye for now.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me